This program is also for the TV show that I host out of San Francisco. It's called Eagle and Condor, and it's at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time every Sunday. So tell your friends. And my TV show competes with football, baseball, basketball. So I need your help and support. So here we go. My first guest will be William Simmons of the state of Oklahoma. And well, I'll let each of our guests introduce themselves and what nation they're from, as well as I said, the issues that they're here to present and what solutions they are looking for. So here we go with William Jimbo Simmons.
Thank you, Tony. It's an honor to be here in this space and share some words and why we're here. And for me, I've been a part of this work since 1977 when we began to formulate what we needed to do. If some of you remember, back in 1973 was the occupation of Wounded Knee in North America. Well, that created a need to go to the international community. We were talking about treaty rights. Always give recognition to those warriors of Wounded Knee, because if it hadn't have been for them standing up, then we wouldn't be here today, because they were the warriors at that time that helped develop this indigenous movement that we have today. And today, we're here again in the United Nations. For some of us that have been coming here for me, well over 30, 40 years, starting back in Geneva, Switzerland in 1981. And when I went to Geneva, Switzerland in 1981, it was about sacred sites. How do we protect our sacredness of our places we go to worship, how we view the land, the earth itself. So that was how I began to get involved in this work. And one of my first times coming to the United Nations was called Indigenous Peoples in the Land. And the next year I found myself coming to the Commission on Human Rights, when it was the Commission on Human Rights. And since that time, being involved in helping develop some of the issues and being helped develop some of the things that we felt that was important. When we came here in 1977, I didn't come in 77, but I came in 81. There were three main objectives. One of those objectives was to honor Indian treaties. The other objective was to develop a declaration of some sort, some principles that indigenous peoples could rally around. The other part of it was October 12th, which we were referred to as Columbus Day, what we look at as the so-called genocide that came to the Americas. So since that time, you know, we've been organizing around that particular date, but in doing that, it had brought unity and solidarity of many indigenous peoples, not just in the Americas, but around the world. And so a lot of that work that began then is a continuation of what I would say walking in the footsteps of our ancestors, because I believe strongly in the spiritual understanding of who we are and where we come from is very important in this forum, because we're in a time when we see a lot of our so-called rights being taken away from us. And my particular opinion is that we really need to step up our work. And I'd like to see us begin to start thinking about the need for our convention, the need to elevate the declaration to that of the convention. Because I see a lot of the issues that's being presented, and the way I look at what's happening with this work is that, you know, it's open to the point where a lot of our people are given our information. There's no ethics protecting the work that we've done. And so I like to see us try to take it to another level, and that level being that of a convention. So I just want to mention that that's one of the main reasons why I'm here, is to carry on that voice that our ancestors came here in 1977, and there's a very few of them that are left today that initiated this work. And next year will be 50 years that when our people came to the United Nations. And I would like to see that maybe it's time for us to close that door and start working towards a convention. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, William Jimbo Simmons. And a little bit of history there. He's giving us Indians getting together in Geneva, Switzerland, 1977. And I must say that the pioneer indigenous person that we're all familiar with is Chief Destaque, otherwise known as Levi General, and the chief of the Cayuga peoples representing the Iroquois Confederacy. And he came to talk to what was then called the League of Nations. Although he was denied, he made an impact. He came with his wampum, and he talked about the same issues that we're still talking about today: the environment, honoring the treaty, the sacred land, and protecting the environment. Those are real primary issues. So I want to thank Jimbo for his explanation. I've invited Miss Keely Badger. She's a consultant, and in this case today, she's a consultant with AIM West. And well, Keely Badger, I'd like for you to talk to us about something very historic in the United States. The United States has never admitted nor apologized, my relatives, for having sterilized over 70,000 Native American women through the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the Indian Health Services. Not apologize at all. However, last February, we have a very historic bill that passed in Nuevo Mexico. That's why I've invited Ms. Keely Badger to welcome and explain to us how she went about doing that.
Thank you so much, Tony, and greetings to everyone. It's an honor to be here. I have to thank Tony because I first started coming to the United Nations in 2019 with the American Indian Movement West, and had the pleasure of meeting Jean Whitehorse and other extraordinary activists and advocates. My background has been around the forced sterilization of Native American women and women of color, particularly in the United States, looking at that through the lens of international human rights law as a crime against humanity, arguably rising to the crime of genocide under the Genocide Convention, and looking at international forums and how we could really advocate and raise awareness for the plight of Native women in the United States and also women globally all over the world, because we know that these crimes committed here under U.S. eugenics laws and were not unique to the United States, and actually happened in many countries around the world, including Peru and Canada, and more is coming out about the realities of those crimes and the suffering of survivors in those countries daily. And so thank you to Tony for bringing me into the UN world. And I had the pleasure of meeting Jean and connecting with Jean Whitehorse through a film called Amma many years ago. And I was blown away that women were starting to speak out about their experiences having been forcibly sterilized, mainly by Indian Health Service facilities across the Southwest. And so as I started to do more research, I found that thousands and thousands of women had been sterilized, and that very little research had been done, particularly at the federal level and at the state level. And so really, I think with this genesis at the Permanent Forum last year, we convened a group of amazing Native activists, women in New Mexico, and very quickly wrote Senate Memorial 14 last fall, which urges the state of New Mexico to first and foremost acknowledge its history and role in forcibly sterilizing Native American women and women of color in the state, to memorialize and honor those women and the families of those women, and also to investigate the scale and scope of these crimes, to actually solicit health records and as much information from Indian Health Services and privately contracted physicians as can be ascertained. And finally, to actually recommend to the state a truth and reconciliation process that is Native-led and Native-run and culturally appropriate for what happened in New Mexico. And in sort of a historic moment, that memorial passed unanimously in the Senate, thanks to the political leadership of Senator Linda Lopez and Senator Shannon Pinto, among other state reps. And so the working group is sort of off and running now in its first few months to initiate the work of that memorial. And so much, I think, is credited to Jean Whitehorse for her decades of advocacy, speaking to her lived experience in New Mexico. And of course, organizations like AIM West that have given this issue, which is a very dark issue around forced sterilization, a platform in international forums. So it's really my pleasure to be a small part of this movement that's burgeoning in New Mexico and hopefully will inspire other states to investigate their own history with forced sterilization. And I think ultimately one day get a U.S. apology for what happened and also be able to take these cases through the Inter-American Court and perhaps through the federal court for reparations for survivors. So with that, I'm happy to.
Thank you very much,
Pass my
Keely.
time.
And my relatives, I want to preface some of that the American Indian movement, the women of the American Indian movement, North America proper, organized women of all red nations, otherwise known as WARN. And in the early 70s, they began to tabulate this sterilization program that was occurring. So we must give credit to the women of all red nations. And also, Keely mentioned the country of Peru as among the many countries who have been sterilizing people. Well, it was just discovered several years ago that Peru, in fact, had sterilized over 300,000 indigenous women in a short period during the early 90s, the late 80s, early 90s, primarily during the administration of the Fujimori administration, as you all might recall. But it's a heinous procedure. It's got to cease, and that's why the Special Rapporteur on Indigenous Peoples, Dr. Albert Barume, has embarked on this endeavor, and he's now submitted a 11-point questionnaire as a form of a survey around the country, asking all governments to please respond to that. Hopefully, we're going to get a summary report of that here at this permanent forum. So I thank you, Keely, for your work, and at New Mexico. And by the way, Nuevo Mexico, is going to have elections for a new governor. And guess who's running for governor in New Mexico? Deb Howland. So keep that in mind, my relatives. And here, I'd like to introduce Jean Whitehorse, primary focal point person for bringing the issue of sterilization to the United Nations. Please, Jean Whitehorse.
Yat Asia Jean Whitehorse in Shadow and so to the Chili Bashin Adoshin Etash Shado Toge Etashinale. Good afternoon, I'm Jean Whitehorse, and I just introduced myself and my clan. That's how we introduce ourselves back home. And I'm a daughter of a Navajo code talker who uses unbreakable code that was vital to the United States victory over Japan during World War II. Some of you probably heard about the Navajo code talker. I'm sharing my story today to show that this is far more than just a legislative text. Personal story that one continues to happen to countless family. I'm a survivor of the government boarding school at age 5, and I'm also a survivor of the relocation at age 19. And I became a victim of the United States government native sterilization at age 22. Sterilization was a reality for thousands of Native women in 1960 into 70s. Many were subject to procedure without their informed consent through the Indian Health Service. In 1972, I was admitted to Gallup Indian Medical Center after a ruptured appendix. I was in extreme pain, and I was required to sign forms before surgery. I wanted more children, only to later discover I had been sterilized without my knowledge or consent. Years later, my grandma asked why I only had one daughter. She told me that her Navajo name was Baachina, which means many children. That is when I realized I was meant to have a large family. I felt ashamed and guilty for not living up to my sacred name. I never told her that I could no longer have children. There is no Navajo word for sterilization. In our cultural, true wealth is our children. They are the guardian of our heritage. When Native women were sterilized, it wasn't only the individual loss, but it was a loss of generation. For years, I carried this burden in silence. I finally broke my silence in 2010. But I was not alone. This is not only a personal tragedy, it's a grave violation of rights of health, body autonomy, and informed consent under the United Nations Declaration on Rights of Indigenous People. These acts constitute crime against humanity under the Rome Statute, and many cases may rise to genocide through the prevention of birth within the indigenous community. Globally, hundreds of thousands of indigenous people from the United States to Canada to Peru and beyond have been affected, yet full scope remains undocumented, and these violations continues in the present decade. There are signs of progress. In February, as Keely mentioned, in the state of New Mexico passed a state memorial which acknowledged the abuse and calling for the pathway towards justice. Survivors are beginning to come forward. The time for the global action is now. The UN, therefore, I respectfully urge the immediate initiation of the UN Global Study in 2026, an official UN statement condemning these practices, and the member state acknowledge the abuse, investigate them, and provide reparation, and the strict international accountability mechanism. I also call upon the United States to formally apologize and be held accountable for these crimes that they have stolen our future and inflicted intergeneration trauma. This is not just a loss of generation, it is a loss of the future. No woman shouldn't have to carry this alone. No people should have their future taken away from them. We are here, we are speaking, and we ask the world to listen. I have done this in 2019, and I came back last year, 2025. And like Tony said, we asked for a study at Keely, and so last year we had a special rapporteur that we met with, and he did a survey, sent out questions, but what we really want, is asking the United nation to move forward with the study all over, not just New Mexico. New Mexico is only one state out of 50, but this is the country too, because United Nations, a lot of other countries come here and, address their issues, and this is what this is for. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jean Whitehorse. My relatives, you see here among us some elderly people, actually outside of Keely, that is. But having Jean Whitehorse among our elders at 78 years old, my relatives, she's a strong woman. So she raises the standards for those of you watching this program that you have to stay strong, keep fighting as well with the words that she shared with us. Now I'd like to introduce Miss Casey Camp. And before I do, I just want to say that we in the American Indian Movement have great respect for her and her family and her people. Her brother was among those that gave their time to be at Wounded Knee that Jimbo had mentioned in South Dakota back in 1973. Carter Camp was among those that provided the leadership and the courage to stand up against the world's biggest army. And you know what that army is up to nowadays. But now I'd like to introduce Miss Casey Camp of the Great Ponca Nation.
Thank you, Tony.
Oh.
Appreciate being here with this panel of powerful people. Ponca, Oklahoma. Judy is my true name. I'm a Ponca woman. I live in the occupied territory of Oklahoma. I'm grateful to be here at this particular time in history where the theme of this UN gathering for the Indigenous peoples happens to be the health of Indigenous people in relationship to conflict. And we should know. We've lived that since that man named Columbus came under the doctrine of discovery to take land, life, and future from our people. At this time, listening to these stories, it reminds me of so many things. The missing and murdered Indigenous women, children, and people started with that onslaught under the doctrine of discovery in 1492. It hasn't ended. It's taken many, many forms. I'm here with my eldest daughter, Mati Julia. She was born in 1970. And it's difficult to talk about the happiness that I've experienced having her, followed by Mikasi in 73, Suzeta in 76, Haduma, Jeffrey in 79, because I had that honor to continue having children when many of the women that were my contemporaries particularly had their children in Claremore Indian Hospital, never had another child because they were sterilized. And when I came home with my babies on their cradle boards and shared them with my community, we rejoiced because we'd gone through so much, reduced down to just over 200 with the smallpox blankets when we lived up in our traditional territory of the North. And then our forced removal in 1876 that reduced us even further. And then the Dawes Act, then the Relocation Act. In the 50s, I was 8 years old when we were relocated into the cities and left there on our own without our people and our way of being. And then more, Mama and Daddy being kidnapped into boarding schools prior to that, our language robbed, our way of life robbed, even the food that we grew no longer available to us to grow, and land theft and land theft and land theft. And then the incursion of the extractive industry that furthered the genocide that we are still experiencing with ConocoPhillips in 66 there, with man camps that have come through in the ways of living in the little trailer courts or in the motels and bringing their drugs and their alcohols and killing our women and killing our children and killing our future. So when we come to the United Nations, we come here as full partners in our understanding of what a treaty means. We're not stakeholders. We are rights holders here. And when we come with joining our voices for our futures, then we're capable of changing things. The reason that we travel with movement rights with the Women's Earth and Climate Action Network is because we are part of GARN, the Indigenous Council for the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature, recognizing that human beings in our cosmology and all around the earth, we believe that humans are not separate from nature, but we are nature, protecting ourselves at this time. So we bring news of how in Ponca territory we have enacted a statute called the immutable Ponca rights of nature, the immutable Ponca rights of the rivers, in order to protect not only our Ponca people from extinction, but all living things that we're all related to. Next we go to Colombia. We'll be leaving tomorrow morning about 3:30 a.m. to be the first nation, the Ponca Nation of Oklahoma, to endorse the fossil fuel treaty, that is a phase out of fossil fuels. And we must find a way to do it in a just transition so that there isn't more rape of Mother Earth, of taking the critical minerals from our indigenous lands. We have to stop the data centers that are robbing the waters. And our coalition in Oklahoma has been strong and powerful with 39 federally recognized tribes. We come together, as we all have to. Ankanaji, we stand together.
Oh, thank you very much, Elder Casey Camp and my relatives. She mentioned that pirate who washed onto our shores here in the Americas in 1492, lost and diseased, and our people fed and healed them. And little did we know that their agenda was not only to bring the cross or the sword to Christianize, but it was land and resources that was on their agenda, and gold primarily. That has not changed. The plundering of our lands and resources is still underway. She mentioned the extractive industries. We're talking about the gas, oil, and lithium nowadays. That's big, and it's ironic, or maybe it's not so ironic, but there is no international legally binding instrument or convention to hold the extractive mining industries responsible, accountable, nor the investors. The investors, I'm talking about the banks. The banks are the ones that give them the loans. So we have to be thinking about that as we're moving forward. So now I'd like to introduce a good friend whom I just met, but I've known this man's father. I knew him a long time when he was with us, Philip Deere, who was spiritual leader and elder for the American Indian movement back in the day. I'd like to introduce Sam Bone Deere. Sam Deere, please.
Moro. Nokos agidoa, istimasko agidondoa. Barney Joseph Kados. I'm Bear Clan. I'm of the Muskogee Nation. And I come here to observe and see what's going on since my father was here almost 50 years ago. And so I'd like to start out by saying what he told me years and years ago. He said that there was a prophecy that he would be standing before the world to bring issues about our people so that the world can hear. And when he said that, and it reminds me of what's going on today. We are bringing these issues that we have of indigenous people, these issues that we have, still going on today because nobody listened to us at home. So we hope that the world can hear all these issues that is taking place. As I go around and listen and hear and talk to these people, I hear memories of what my father used to tell me about coming here. And one of the things that, I came here to put out there so that people can hear is about what's going on in Wetumpka, Alabama with our old homeland. When I say old homeland, our people were relocated to what is now called Oklahoma on what they called the Trail of Tears. And so of course we left our homeland, our ceremonial grounds, our burial sites. And as time went on and everything, one of our old ceremonial grounds was called Hickory Ground. It was the last capital of the Muskogee people. And today you can look on the webs and stuff and look for Justice for Hickory Ground, and it'll explain a lot of things more in detail than what I can do today. But I'll just kind of go a little bit over a little bit. What had happened is that land, that ceremonial ground, the federal government put it in restrictive status as a sacred site. And there was a group of people that weren't federally recognized, and then they got federally recognized later, back in the mid-'70s, late '70s. So they turned native back in the '70s. Our traditional grassroots people were native or indigenous from the beginning of time, and that's where we come from. But they found that property, and so when the government put it in as a sacred place and everything, and they took care of it as a historical site, that group of people that turned native back in the mid-'70s, they said, we are of a descendant of the Muskogee people. We will take care of that land. So the government gave them 20 years to take care of that land. So they did. They took care of it 20 years. When 20 years came up, the government gave them the key to that property and said, okay, go ahead and take care of your land. And as soon as they got it, they started their bulldozers and they started tearing down the place. And when they tore it down, they tore down the old ceremonial grounds. They excavated 57 bodies, wrapped them up in newspaper, and put them in plastic buckets in a metal building. Today, those bones that they picked up or they gathered and everything are in Auburn University, and they won't give them back to the traditional people that have been relocated to Oklahoma. We still have our Miko. Miko means chief from our people. And the Miko, he told me that, he said, I was thinking about it. He said, I better fight for our ground. And he said, because that might be my great-grandfather that they have in that bucket. So if we think about these things, we all are going to die. And when we die, somebody might say, rest in peace. But to the people that built on top of that ceremonial ground, they destroyed it, removed all them people so that they can have a casino. So the word rest in peace, if it keeps on going, means that it's only rest in peace unless it's a casino that's going to be built. So to all people that are living, that is going to be that passes away, that dies and gets buried and everything, things like that could happen to you. So it's not really a Muskogee issue, it's a human being issue. Yes. So those are some things that we have to think about. And I bring this to the world, to the United Nations, so that they can hear what's going on. Mado for letting me talk, Mado for Tony, and right now I work for, or I'm a board member for an organization called United American Indian Involvement in Burbank. So, okay. And the president or the chairman of that board is with me today, and I'll have her explain a little bit about what goes on down there. Her name is Hope Craig.
Stango Hope Craig, Jahajipkados, Ishti Muskogee Doez. My name is Hope Craig. I'm of the Muskogee people. I am one clan. I want to take a brief moment to remind everyone about the other longest walk, and that's the urban relocation of our relatives to urban centers. Our story is never told, and what happens were overlooked. I represent an organization, proudly serve an organization, the United American Indian Involvement, that is located in Los Angeles, California. We serve the largest urban Native population across the nation. But today, our organization, we provide health care, which is medical, dental, and behavioral health and substance abuse. And on the other side, we have cultural programs. As of today, almost 2 years, we have been without an IHS contract. And you know, for Elder Casey, first of all, it's an honor to be here with each and every one of you guys. I sat and intentionally listened to everything you guys had to say. But when I think about the theme for this permanent forum is healthcare, Indigenous healthcare. IHS, and when I hear about sterilization, who's going to hold IHS accountable? If they sterilized our women, what else are they capable of doing? The punitive, the punitive framework that Indian Health Services work under continues today. It didn't stop with the forced sterilization of our women. It continues to happen. Right now, we have close to 170,000 urban natives living in Los Angeles County who do not have access to Indian Health Services because of the punitive framework that we often have to fight. But who's going to go up against IHS? So as I was sitting there, I had to look at UNDRIP. UNDRIP is a framework that the United American Indian Involvement have adopted because I believe that it also applies to urban natives as well. Trust obligation does not stay on our reservations. That trust obligation extends off of our reservation. In my opinion, IHS is in violation of Article 24 of UNDRIP. But again, who's going to hold them accountable? This is my first time here at the Permanent Forum. And as I reflect on my second day, it is a beautiful feeling to be around Indigenous people. When I hear Indigenous people looking out in that General Assembly yesterday, we represented Indigenous people. And it was, for me, coming here, bringing Indigenous issues to our Indigenous people so we can find Indigenous solutions. That is why I'm here today. I'm hoping to learn more, but I do encourage everyone to look into the United American Indian Involvement, look into the practices of Indian Health Services. It's no different. It's no different from BIA, BIE, the conditions that the lower 48, the people who are the tribes who are here in the lower 48, Native Hawaiians, Alaska Natives, we are still under a colonized construct, a framework that is erasing us. Assimilation did not end, termination did not end, deprivation did not end. That is why 70% of our tribal members live off the reservation. That is due to federal policies, federal Indian policies in order to terminate, since they can't kill us because it costs too much to just outright kill us. But what we can do, we can give you a slow death, and that's what you're seeing. You're witnessing a slow death of our people. Mado.
Thank you very much, Hope. And my relatives, I want to thank everyone here for speaking on these issues. And don't forget that we are recording live right now, but this program will be for airing on Sunday, April 26th on the Eagle and Condor Show. We have just a few minutes. I'd like to ask perhaps 2 minutes, maybe each one, to close the program. Please, Jimbo.
And we're still on that trail of tears, and it's a trail of death and tears. There was a Choctaw chief when the Trail of Tears was going along, and he asked, a reporter asked him, and he said he looked at it as a trail of death and tears. Nowadays, you just hear the Trail of Tears. So they kind of gloss it over a little bit to make it look like we just cried along the way. Sure, we cried along the way because a lot of our relatives died, and I'm Choctaw, by the way. But, this walk that we talk about, this journey, and this attempt to erase us, we have to also go back and look at our little bit of history. And I'd like to go back probably almost 50 years when in 1978, there was an attempt by Congress to abrogate all Indian treaties, to terminate the Indian reservations and so forth. This came out of Washington State. And in 1977, the American Indian Movement leadership got together and formed an international gathering. And this took place at DQ University. And out of that gathering came the idea of, well, we need to protest, we need to walk. And what we did is we organized a walk that started from Alcatraz Island with a ceremony and started from Sacramento to Washington, D.C. It took us 5.5 months, and people always refer to me as the first one to take that volunteered, and I was. But there was other people later that developed. There was 14 people, 40 people, and the day we started from Sacramento, we had over 400 people. When we got to the California state line, some of our people couldn't continue on because of their jobs, stuff like that. And one of our leaders, Dennis Banks, who was fighting extradition back to South Dakota, couldn't leave either. So there was about 125 of us that decided to carry that at that time we was carrying a sacred pipe, because we felt that this was what we needed, was that spiritual prayer to take across this country. And as we grew along the way, I can refer to when we were in Kansas, we had like maybe 700 to 1,000 people, and that was in like April, May. But by the time we got to Washington, D.C. on July 4th in 1978, we had 30,000 people. 30,000 people walking in solidarity, not just us. And I also remember Bon Deere's dad used to talk about, we're still on the longest walk. And today, we're still continuing that walk.
Oh, thank you very much, Jimbo. And my relatives, those 11 bills that were intended to abrogate treaty rights, virtually every one of those treaties was defeated. And in fact, what rose from there is the American Indian freedom of religion. Indians were not allowed to pray openly, publicly, or among themselves until 1978. And along with that successful walk across the country, the Indian Child Welfare Act was adopted as well, intended to keep families united rather than separating and putting them away in foster homes or being adopted. They could stay with the extended family. So very successful. Remember that long walk, 78, and we may consider doing something similar next year or in 2 years in 78. Thank you very much, Jimbo. And Keely, you have a few words?
Just a few, yeah. I just want to thank everyone for their words of support around the work of forced sterilization and raising awareness. I want to thank Elena Giacchi, who was a delegate with the American Indian Movement last year, who co-wrote the memorial in New Mexico and has been doing women's reproductive justice work for the last 35 years in the state. And so often women would come up to Elena and say that they knew something had happened to them and they couldn't have more children, but they had never actually had a formal exam to understand that they had been forcibly sterilized. So I think in terms of who do we hold accountable, it's us that will hold Indian Health Services accountable. It's us who will speak about this in our communities. It's us who will speak about it here in the forum and hold the United Nations accountable to honor the global study that they committed to in 2019 when Jean first called for it. If anybody is interested to read the memorial, the language there, you can go to the newmexico.gov website and look up Senate Memorial 14. We will have a lot more information coming out in the next few weeks, actually, about that. So please stay up to date on that issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Keely Badger. Thank you. Jean Whitehorse, please, closing words.
Thank you very much for listening to all of us up here. And one thing that really changed my the way, affected me was, like I mentioned, that, I went to the boarding school, age 5, went on relocation. But when I went on that relocation, I think about the government, they sent a letter to my father before I was 18. And I actually was supposed to go to Los Angeles. I was actually supposed to go to Los Angeles, but my father said, no, she's not going anywhere. And November, I turned 19, and I got another letter in February. Now they were sending me to Oakland. And my father said the same thing, and then they told him she's no longer 18. See, that's how the government controls our life. They make the decisions for us, where we go, what we say. But I was fortunate to go to Oakland because that's when that civil rights movement was going on. I was right in the middle of all that. Oakland was the place where they had the Black Panthers headquarters. I went into San Francisco. watched the hippie movement at Ashbury. Then I went into Berkeley University where they were protesting against the Vietnam War. And then in November, when the takeover of Alcatraz took place, there was some young people that came to Oakland Friendship House during the Thanksgiving dinner, and they told us about it. So I went over there that same weekend, and I was on the island at 2 weeks after it was taken over. So I'm glad that I went there at the government's expense. They sent me there to learn about myself. They paid my way around. That's how I became a member of the American Indian movement, because that's where I met up with them. Thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Camp, please, closing words.
I think that the most important thing that we should all realize right now is that we're on the brink as a species of disappearing from the face of our Mother Earth. And I want to say thank you to each and every person here with the wisdom that they're sharing, and how you continue to lift our voices, Tony, is very important. I would like you all to realize that it is up to each and every one of us to make a difference in where we are. That by upholding Indigenous sovereignty, we are not only protecting our future generations, but we're protecting yours. That all of our neighbors will benefit if the rights of nature is upheld in Ponca territory. Their land will not be poisoned. Their children will have a chance to be cancer-free in the future. We all have to be extraordinarily proactive about these data centers as well. People aren't talking about them, but the 3 in Stillwater, Oklahoma, in our territory right now, if they're passed, will use 80 million gallons of fresh water per day. Per day. They're trying to get nuclear back up. They're calling it clean energy. That's a lie. Carbon trading is a trick. We have to pay attention to the undertones of everything that the colonized capitalists are saying in order for life to continue.
Thank you very much. Sam?
I'd like to say that in our ceremonies, we dance all night, we dance all day, and in the morning, one of the things that they tell us, or they're not chanting, but they're telling us at the end of the night, early in the morning, they say, Yikchit Wilimongas, which means keep standing strong. So as Native people and as people of this world, Indigenous people here, we are fighting for things that should have been taken care of a long time ago. So, like I said, Yikchit Wilimongas, stand strong. Mado.
Oh, thank you, Sam Deere. And that's it, my relatives. I want to thank the Indigenous Media Zone and the UN Correspondent Association. All right, we'll see you once again across Indian land.